Monday Morning Matters
Perspectives
from Southeast Asia.
Welcome back on Monday Morning Matters. On the second segment of Urban Green, Future of Southeast Asia Architecture with Felino A. Palafox Jr., prominent Filipino architect and environmentalist at Palafox Associates. He will be discussing on the postcards from the future, which is one of the ways Felino does to inform politicians and authorities about the uglification of their cities and show them instead the possibilities of a better city through reimagining and redesigning.
Since you are from the Philippines, you have done amazing work all over the world in terms of building so many different kind of architecture as well as your activism. But when it comes to the Philippines, if you were to assess the urban planning there, what can you say about it? And what is the best and worst practices that we can learn?
In urban planning, a lot of urban planning initiatives have been put forward in the Philippines. In fact, before I started working abroad, I was 25 to 27 years old. I was team leader and senior planning for development planning of Metro Plan Manila, Metro Manila Transportation, Land Use and Development Project. And I think we put forward more than 300 recommendations from transportation to land use to development to addressing hazards before they become disasters. And unfortunately, in my part of the world, we have issues of good governance, peace and order, and not addressing more effectively climate change. And from concept to commitment to completion, it takes decades or years. Unlike my work in Dubai, they can decide right away. Or anywhere in the world.
It's a different kind of challenge.
I think it's a leadership issue also. And after observing so many cities, so many countries, working in many of them or giving lectures, there are 5 success elements that I see. First, you must have visionary leadership, leaders with vision. Number 2, strong political will. Leaders that should be able to have the will to implement those good visions. Number 3, good planning, good urban planning, town planning. Number 4, good design like architecture, engineering, and the other built environment professions. Then number 5, good governance or good management. Unless you have that, you may have the best laid out plans in the world, but if you don't have that, you're not going to make it. Like the rulers of Dubai, which I had the opportunity to work with them, a lot of good literature have been written about Lee Kuan Yew, the mayor, former mayor Bloomberg of New York, or Richard Daley of Chicago, many of the prime ministers in Scandinavian countries. They have that. And
they have the vision.
They have the vision, political will, good planning, good design, and good governance.
What about knowledge? Do you think politicians should have urban planning knowledge? Especially more and more people are projected to be living in cities in the future.
Yeah, politicians should appreciate the benefits of good urban planning, because even the good leaders in the world, they follow the recommendations of urban planners, architects, and engineers, and see the benefits of it. And unfortunately, sometimes some political leaders, they don't consult anymore. And sometimes also, I call it in one of the things I've been presenting in the Philippines now, I call it postcards from the future. I send
Postcards.
pictures to the mayors of the uglification of their cities.
Oh, wow.
Then
what is that?
the ugliness of their cities. Then we show to urban design or architectural perspectives and how they should look better, how they should look like. And I label them postcards from the future.
So how many cities have been under your spell?
Yeah, even if they're not our project, I do it. And sometimes, most of the mayors, in fact, appreciated it. And I thought at first they would get very upset Many of them, they hired us. And I tell them, because the uglification of cities in the Philippines, because the built environment, most of the time, the ones deciding are politicians and their favored contractors, favored consultants who may not be the best, and a lot of lawyers deciding. The legal profession is more powerful than the architectural profession in the decisions being made on the built environment. So instead of complaining, writing about the complaints, we draw it, we design it. And there are so many requests all over the world that presenting this concept of drawing, designing postcards from the future. In fact, I'm putting timelines like Philippines 2021. By 2021, the Philippines will be 500.
So you don't want to follow Malaysia 2020?
No, 2021 because Philippines became Philippines in 1521. It will be 500 years old.
Because in Malaysia we
The
have
2020
the
vision, yeah. But the 2020 vision was also one of our past presidents. President Ramos said that 2020 vision. But one challenge we have in the Philippines is there's no continuity from one administration to the other. There's lack of intellectual or institutional continuity. And leaders, they must be educated. I think good leaders must not be intellectually challenged or integrity challenged. Honesty, integrity, and professionalism should also be there. The small town of Curitiba, Brazil, it's one of the smartest, greenest city in the world. About 30 years ago, a fellow lecturer in Harvard, James Lerner, became mayor. He was an architect, urban planner, and most of his city council were architects and engineers. So they were able to transform that small city, Curitiba, and became a good model for urban planning, sustainable development in the world.
How do you avoid whitewashing the whole concept of green architecture?
Greenwashing.
Yeah, greenwashing.
A lot of people claim they are green and sustainable, but actually we call them greenwashing because they're not really green and sustainable. And a lot of advertising and promotions to promote their project. But if you look at it, it's not really greenwashing. Things like when you build a building, I think 5% of that is the carbon footprint of bringing in the building materials into the project site. And some buildings, just 25, 30 years old, they demolish them for another new building. So when you demolish the building which is still structurally stable, that's another 5% in carbon footprint for bringing out the materials. Then you bring in a new building material, that's another 5%. So for that particular site, you already have 15% embodied energy as a carbon footprint. Another one, many leaders, whether from the private sector or from industry and business, they want to maintain their big villas in the middle of the city. And when you have this one thing we learned in a conference we had in Boston in 1998, when you have a large single-family home in the middle of the city, you have a larger environmental footprint because you are arrogating to yourself prime urban land resources, preventing more people, more families to live closer to their places of work, encouraging more urban sprawl to encroach into the forest, into the farms. So if you live in the city, it's more sustainable to be in medium-rise or high-rise multi-family dwellings.
In Malaysia, in the situation of Malaysia, the high cost of living in the city as well as the high price of properties have somehow create this process called gentrification,
yes,
where more and more people are actually going out of the city rather than going in.
Yes.
As an urban planner, how do you avoid this? How do you create an environment where people are able to be part of the city society?
Yes. One of my professors in Harvard used to tell us, this century will be a re-century. Reimagine, replan, redesign, re-architecture, re-engineer reuse, recycle, and hopefully redevelopment, renewal, hopefully will have renaissance. And there are opportunities to do urban renewal, so revitalize the inside of the cities. And I've worked on projects like those, like in the Philippines, in Makati, the financial district, there used to be a brownfield, a power plant that was polluting even the neighborhood. So the power plant was decommissioned, there was environmental remediation, clean up the site. And we created a mixed-use high-rise development, tall buildings, with 49% non-saleable area, big open spaces. It's called Rockwell Center. It's the highest land value appreciation in the whole of the Philippines. So it can be done. That's a deteriorating part of that city. And now we revitalize it, we renewed it. It's the highest value appreciation in Metro Manila.
If you were to give one example in the cities in Southeast Asia that probably cities around Southeast Asia can learn from, what city would be the best example?
Yeah, it's predictable. Usually they sell it. Singapore. Singapore, because they had good leadership. They were lucky to have Lee Kuan Yew to have with them. And also, the leadership, they believe in good urban planning, going around the world to get best practices and apply it. And so was Dubai, and that's one. Another one in Japan, for me, it's Kyoto and Fukuoka. Kyoto and Fukuoka, they're both very walkable cities. And Tokyo also is a collection of big neighborhoods. Hong Kong, despite its issues, and as I mentioned, if the rest of the world followed the density of Hong Kong, all the world's 7 billion population, we can all fit in the state of Texas. And Hong Kong is about 70% open space because they went vertical cities, and all of this that have become good models of urban planning, urban development. I think leadership was the key.
Leadership.
Yeah, leadership, and faster way from concept to commitment to completion, shorter time periods.
This is the end of the second segment of the three-part interview with Felino A. Palafox Jr. on Urban Green, Future of Southeast Asia Architecture.
You're now listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing.